Suppose you're in London where the cars come from the opposite direction, and you're about to step off the curb in front of a car because you're glancing to the left like we do in the USA instead of to the right like you need to do when you're in the UK. Now here's a question. Who loves you more? The person who lets you step off of the curb into the oncoming traffic? Or the person who says to you, who raises their voice at you, hey, don't do that. I mean, if someone says, hey, that's all right, you do you. You cross the street the way you want to. Does that person love you? Does that person care about you? Or does the person who loves you, is that actually the person who's saying, please don't do that, that's dangerous. You won't like how that turns out. The Apostle Paul was concerned about the Christians in Galatia, and he wrote to them, that's our New Testament book, Galatians. And he knew that these Christians had voices in their heads giving them bad advice about moral choices, about spiritual choices. And some of the Galatians were actually angry with Paul because Paul was repeatedly calling them back to the truth. And they had affection for, they applauded, they loved the people who were telling them the wrong thing, but they were mad at Paul for telling them the truth. So Paul wrote, have I now become your enemy by telling you the truth? And most of us can think of a time in our lives when someone was telling us the truth, but we chose to view that person as an enemy because he or she was not saying what we wanted to hear, when actually they were loving us all the time, and the people who were telling us what we wanted to hear were not loving us at all. And that's where so many believers are today. That's why it gets harder for students, for young adults, for all of us. But especially when you're younger, that's why it gets harder to follow Jesus, because the voices that advise you to do otherwise just get louder and they multiply over time. But friend, the voice that tells you, just do what makes you happy, God wants you to do what makes you happy, that is not the voice of Jesus. Those are not the words of Jesus.